this is going to happen all day. So this face, hope everybody's enjoying it. Want to introduce our next panel. It's our first daily debate of the day. Will the rewards of AI outweigh the risks? And I'd like to invite all our panelists and our partners up at Business Insider to join us on stage. Thank you.
Good morning, all. My name's Pete Spandy. I'm a publisher and CRO of Business Insider. We're thrilled to be a part of Advertising Week this week. And I've got 4 of the leading companies in AI is applied to advertising. So we're going to talk about that. Whether or not robots are taking over the world is a part of this, of course, but there are so many other things as well. So this is a very fast-growing market. Roughly estimated about $2 billion spent on AI for advertising this year, going to roughly 25, 30 million. You know how these estimates will change about 10 years from now. So a lot of growth planned. We did a survey recently of hundreds of marketing executives. 85% of them saw increased or very extreme increases in spending for AI and machine learning technology. So we want to dig in and talk a little bit about this. So I know each of you individually, dear audience, know what AI is, but maybe people on either side of you don't. So what we thought we'd do is just go through quickly and talk about how each of the companies of our panelists here are harnessing AI. It is one technology in some respects, but it's actually a multitude of applications of that technology, and really put a little color around how advertisers are currently and maybe in the future utilizing this technology. Patrick, let's start with you. Nope.
Great, thanks Pete. Hi, I'm Patrick Albano. I'm the CRO of a company called Adherent. Our company focuses on machine learning, and if the person next to you doesn't know what machine learning means, it's kind of a subsection of artificial intelligence where machines actually are given a lot of data to analyze and then learn and make decisions on their own based on that data. So we started about 6 years ago thinking how machine learning might transform advertising, and the first thing we started with was ad targeting. And as all of you know, much of the way ad targeting is done in the world is based on 1, 2, or a handful of data points. I'm a man, 18 to 49, I live in New York, and I search for shoes, so I go into a segment of millions of people. But if you apply machine learning to that, you can actually analyze millions of other data points about me that might better predict what I might buy or might do. And so the first thing we do is use machine learning to predict who certain customers of a business might be. We've started to apply that to creative as well, and the machine can make a decision of which creative we should serve to a person. It also can dynamically generate creative for each individual person. And so that's another use of machine learning to actually design ad creative on the fly. The final piece is the machines love data, and they love to know whether they do the right thing or not. And so we feed back in attribution results, whether or not you buy something in a store or you fill a prescription for a drug. We fill that back into the machine and teach the machine whether it was right or wrong, so the machine can then make a decision the next time that's even more accurate. And so that's kind of across the board how we're thinking about machine learning impacting advertising, and we've worked with hundreds of advertisers to do that.
Ophir, why don't we hear about GumGum
Sure.
next?
Hey everyone, it's great to be here. My name is Ophir. I'm the CEO and founder of GumGum. GumGum is an AI company, but specifically what we focus on is something called computer vision. And that's effectively where we train computers to understand imagery in video in a contextual way. And we look at the majority of content published every day across broadcast television, across social, and across the open web, develop an understanding of what's happening across all of that media. And we commercialize that technology in really 3 ways. So we have an advertising division where we target marketing messages to imagery in a highly contextual way. We actually invented a form of advertising called in-image advertising. And we have another division called GumGum Sports, where we look at sports broadcasts and social media, and use computer vision to understand everywhere where a sponsorship appears and actually programmatically identify the actual value of that media in real time. So that's been quite successful. We work with a lot of major rights holders, and with our advertising business, we work with about 70% of Fortune 100 brands, many of the largest publishers in the world. And then we have a social division where we do things like object recognition, facial recognition, sentiment analysis, contextual analysis around visual media, and use that to do a multitude of things, including informing media buys, and also feed that data back into our sports business.
So are they screening Fast and Furious next door?
Are we the only ones that can hear that, or can you all hear that? You can hear it? Awesome. All right, well, I'm going to speak up then. Good morning, everybody. All right, there we go. I like that. Good attitude. So my name is Rob Wilk. I work for Microsoft. It's a small software startup in Seattle. You know, I'll probably come on this panel with a little bit of a slightly different view in the sense of I look at the world through search. So you think about, I work for Bing, and Bing is probably one of the biggest examples of scaled AI out there. Everything from how you make sense of what you see on the web to the relationships between different websites, people, places, products, etc. As it relates to advertising, if you think about all the different permutations at any given moment in search advertising is anywhere from 300,000 to 400,000 advertisers, tens of billions of keywords, different bids happening all the time. How do you make sense of all of that in real time in actually less than a third of a second and serve the ad to the person that is most likely to click on that? So for us, I like to talk about AI just to make it really simple. It's software that learns, and then you take that software that learns and you apply it, and it continues to relearn over time. And search is an incredible example of that, and you see that not only with Bing, but you see it throughout all of Microsoft products now, whether it's Office or Windows or Cortana. That intelligence is now woven throughout all of our products throughout Microsoft.
So I just spent 20 minutes talking about what I think AI is, but
Maybe it's a new audience.
Yeah, no. But I would say it's the same thing. It's software that learns. I think that's a great way of putting it. And specifically for Watson, it has to do with a whole host of those APIs. I called them skills earlier, but the idea that those APIs can be put to work to solve challenges across the board. They're, for better or for worse, as an organization, we are solving lots of different problems with AI. And until today, we've had a number of those solutions trained towards the advertising community, and now we'll have more.
Great. So we talked a little bit about machines that learn or computers that learn. That can be a really scary idea for people, whether it's 2001, Space Odyssey, or AI, the movie from Spielberg, or just stories that will be in the head. In fact, our machines coming to take our jobs or taking over the world. Let's talk a little bit about the risks. Maybe not taking over the world or these kinds of things, but as marketers, where are there challenges and where can things go wrong? So I don't know if anyone has any either specific or generalized stories to talk about there, but I'd love to have someone kick us off here. A story of things going a little bit not as intended.
Want to go, Patrick?
No, go ahead.
Jordan, start.
I heard a podcast a while ago, and it was just a really interesting way of looking at it. The question was put to Mark Andreessen, who is nothing if not a colorful, commentator on technology and where we are. And the question was put to him: is AI going to totally take away our jobs? Is it coming for our jobs? And what he said is, he used an analogy back to the early part of the 20th century, where he talked about the idea of stables and the automobile. And the automobile, when it came about, was thought to be putting people out of jobs everywhere. And of course, if you were in the horseshoe business, it probably did exactly that. But beyond that, it created jobs everywhere. It created the suburbs. It created the shopping mall. It created the automobile industry, obviously, the tire industry. It put people to work building the highway system. And so his thought, and I share this thought, is that certainly it's going to put a number of different industries under pressure, but technology is already doing that. Technology always does do that. But where we're going right now is it's going to create all sorts of new jobs, new ways of approaching markets. And so I think it's nothing but upside and exciting for those who know what to do with it.
Okay, so know what to do with it. What happens when it's in the wrong hands, or what can happen, and then how do we kind of course correct there? Anyone?
Yeah, I think you can say that about any technology, right? Technology can be used for good and technology can be used for bad. And I would say one of the things that we're pretty proud of is we're a founding member of an organization called the Partnership on AI, which actually IBM is as well, Google, Facebook, Apple, because a lot of these larger companies want to be able to share free thinking around applications of AI and what those dangerous situations are. And Microsoft might see one that maybe IBM hasn't seen, and there's no reason why
Not
we should
possible because we have Watson, but I got you.
You know.
well defended. Now you know I'll find one. Though, right?
Yeah.
So for Microsoft people in the room, text me something cool, will you? But the idea is like, yes, we will always compete, and Microsoft is an incredibly competitive company, but there are certain scenarios where you have to take more of a moral or ethical view and share learnings across the board. And with any new technology out there, have we all not seen the darker side of that? Of course we have. And there's just a kind of an inherent, responsibility that you take when you're this large of a company and you have access to this much information to use it in a way that is good for people. And that's a lot of what, if you haven't seen it, I highly suggest you check out partnershipforai.org. That talks a lot about the mission and what we're all collectively trying to accomplish to make sure that we don't find ourselves in any type of like scaled scenario that can be, really, really frightening. And I'll just end by saying, you mentioned the Spielberg movie, and a movie that would be made about the responsible use of software would sell this many tickets, right? So at some point, you have to kind of take away the fantasy a little bit and say, what is reality? And for us, we see it every day, and we actually see some incredibly good, positive uses of AI, even in terms of image recognition. We have a product called Seeing AI, which is literally built for people that are visually impaired. And just imagine an app that you take your phone, and if you cannot see and you're at a restaurant, this app will actually say, hey, hold your phone, move it over here. Okay, stop. Now let me read you the appetizers, the desserts, the main courses. And that was built by engineers who work at Microsoft who are visually impaired. So this can be used for a lot of really good scenarios, but they're just not as sexy as the more frightening ones.
I mean, I have a more controversial approach, or thought on the matter, rather, which is that I think that just because historical technological revolutions have created a lot of jobs does not mean that this one will. And I think if you actually push the time horizon out far out enough, then this eliminates more jobs than it creates. Because ultimately what we're trying to do is create truly intelligent machines. And also, I mean, if we're going to be transparent, like in our business, we displace a lot of jobs. We do personally, right? We take tasks that used to take thousands of people to accomplish, and we now do them programmatically. That doesn't mean that today we're not creating more jobs or opportunities, or at least alternative options, as the amount that we're displacing. But the reality is that AI is very good at doing rote tasks very effectively, very quickly, and that's oftentimes the best production use of that technology is to do that. So you could argue that a lot of these jobs should be eliminated. But speaking, tactically, I think that, just to get a little bit closer to your original question, I do think that a lot of organizations today, particularly in marketing, think about sort of AI as an end rather than a means, because everyone's talking about it and they feel that they need to somehow integrate this thing into their organizations. But ultimately, it's a tool. It's a really good pattern recognizer. It can do a lot of truly amazing things because you're able to train it in a generalized way. And then it can sort of output, it could output results in a generalized way, which is very different than the way that, similar sort of image recognition, for example, in AI was even implemented 5-6 years ago. So incredibly powerful, but I think in order to use this technology properly, you ultimately need to have a very clear sort of goal in mind, because when used properly,
This is the robot saying they don't like what you're saying.
when used properly, you're able to do things that weren't possible historically, and you're able to do things perhaps 10x better than you were able to do historically. That's what's so amazing about this technology. But I think that sort of establishing the end goal and the plan, and then inserting AI into sort of how you're going to accomplish that is sort of the right way to go about it, and not just chasing this sort of technology for the sake of it.
Just to tie those 2 points together, because I think they're good points. I mean, there's no doubt that jobs will change, the types of jobs, but the idea of being able to accomplish something that you never thought was possible is interesting. And I think what isn't usually included in this debate is the types of new jobs we will invent. There's so much cool stuff happening in education technology around AI, where there's personalized lesson plans for students and software that's able to change the type of language that kids are taught in. And they're finding that the personalized lessons help speed up education. They're finding that speaking in more colloquialisms helps students learn. And so the hope is that our education system changes in the way that we think about learning, which will open up new inventions, new ideas, free up time to think about different things. And hopefully there's other industries that we haven't even imagined, or other roles that we haven't even imagined, that can manage the AI in the future.
So I'm a senior marketer, and I call any one of you into my company to help me shape my thinking around how I should be applying machine learning, AI, et cetera. And I want to avoid the risks, but also want to start harnessing, and maybe what's the best way either to be starting or to be kind of accelerating what's being working? What would you say to that client? What would you say to me?
Rob's the only one that will show up in a tie.
That's how we roll at Microsoft.
Credible with my money.
I think it's an interesting time, because a lot of senior marketers are doing a ton with their data, are saying we have a lot of data, we're collecting a lot of data, we have it here, but they don't really know what to do with it. And so I think the easiest place to start is to start to understand, what are you doing with data, what do you have, and then how do you make sense of that? Because just having human eyes look at data today on a senior marketing side is only going to allow you to do limited things with it. But if you start to use AI to make sense of your customers, what types of things that they want to get from you, then you can really get a competitive advantage.
Can I add something?
Please.
I'm not the moderator.
You look like
can
you
say
were ready.
whatever
You
you'd
look
like.
like you're ready to go. You know, I one of my pet peeves about the business is that we go to senior marketers and we speak way above their cognitive abilities. Not that they're not intelligent, but
They're not experts.
it is the equivalent of opening up a car engine to me, who has no clue about car engines whatsoever, and saying, "Oh, just look at that, thing over there." It doesn't make any sense. So I've asked at least our team to speak in terms that people can find more tangible and understandable, right? Because then it becomes infinitely easier to have a good conversation and think about how you would use some of this technology to your advantage. And I'll give you just a very simple example. Today on Bing, you can search for a business, and instantly you'll have the ability to chat with that business. This will be an ad product very soon, by the way, but right now, even in the organic results, you can basically have a chat with that business. So imagine it's a restaurant, and you can ask simple questions: what are your hours, whatever. But even if you wanted to ask something in more of a natural way, like my favorite question is, do you take Amex? Which is not American Express. It's it's another way of saying Amex, and the response will be, yes, we take Amex. What is the best, most popular dish versus menu item? Little changes like that. But you can have this really quick conversation that takes care of some of these rote requests. Like, someone who owns a restaurant does not want to sit on the phone and have yet another conversation about their hours, whether they're gluten-free, et cetera, et cetera. So why wouldn't we put that in front of consumers and let them take care of some of these rote tasks very quickly? And I think that's the last piece that is missing, is we sit and we talk about AI and marketing AI and all these new technologies, but there is a big piece of the conversation that is not here, which is the average person. How do you introduce this to someone to get them to actually understand that they can even do these things? How many bots are there live today? I mean, there's something like 50,000 bots live today. Go ask the average person, how do you find one? How would you evoke that bot? What conversation would you have? And they would have no idea. So a big part of what we all need to do collectively is introduce this to a consumer in a way that they can actually understand. And that's a big part of what we're trying to get that message out. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
I wasn't even. You're
All right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So all right. So there are risks.
Trying to be fair.
There are clearly some rewards. How would you recommend that marketers specifically can set up these projects for those rewards, and how should they be thinking about this? There are new tasks, there are routinizing tasks that were maybe a little bit more mundane, freeing up people to, what's the best framework for really realizing those results, and how do you kind of set those things up and paint a picture for those people?
For us, it's about solving a challenge that they already have, because if they don't have that challenge, they don't need us. And if they don't have that challenge, then they're not going to get what they need internally to get people behind the investment or the time to make it work. And so what are those challenges? I said a little earlier when I was sharing my presentation that a lot of it has to do with just de-risking decisions that are made. As businesses, we make decisions all the time. And sometimes those decisions are right and lead us down a good path, and sometimes those decisions are not right and take us down a bad path. And innovation is all about being open to that and being okay with that. But what AI should be doing is diminishing the distance that exists between all of those decisions that you have to make and getting to the results that are going to return on the investment. There's only so long we can do that. So it's about data, putting data to work and putting it to work in a way that returns quickly.
I think there's a misconception too. It's kind of like part of the topic of the panel that you'll just call in Watson or Bing or GumGum in our companies and just let the AI off on its own. And I think that's a key thing that we help educate marketers on too, is that there's always some kind of human oversight, whether that be, for our company, we set out machine learning models, but we have our data scientists get alerts when the models are doing stuff we didn't expect them to do. And so there's this kind of combination right now of AI and human intervention that helps keep us both safe, but also is the most effective way of doing it right now.
Yeah, I think there's two ways to think about it, and I would agree with that. One is that you can buy products that make great use of AI, but you're buying the results that those products produce. Doesn't make you an AI company. I think for any organization that really does want to immerse itself into AI and take advantage of all the fruits of what that has to offer, you do need to, in a very vertical fashion, integrate that talent into your company, that expertise into your company, understand what data you have access to and why it's differentiated. I think that what Watson and Google and Amazon and everyone's trying to do is sort of cloud-based AI services is it's very smart, it's very admirable, and I think ultimately could be a great business, but I do think it's very early days. And for example, for us, like, we've tried on numerous occasions to leverage what's on the cloud to do the things that we do, and we haven't been able to do so successfully because of cost, because of accuracy, and just because of lack of ability to really tweak things to our needs. So we really have to have that expertise in-house in a very deep way, working on these problems to solve these very specific, very large problems that we're trying to solve. And one more thing I would say about that is just, ultimately you want as much of this technology as possible to become commoditized. So maybe in the realm of like natural language processing, something Watson is incredibly good at, that is an area where you probably could take certain capabilities off the shelf, integrate them into some of the things that you do, and it might work functionally at scale. It's not super cheap to do so, but it could work. But in other areas, computer vision is one that I'm obviously very familiar with, but several others, you really can't take much of that off the shelf and do anything that's really advanced at scale. And I think that's evidenced by the fact that no huge AI solutions that I'm aware of exist by purely integrating a third-party resource into your business. It really still needs to be done in a more fundamental way. There's a lot of artistry associated with it and a lot of expertise that's needed to do it well. It's early days.
The cloud-based solutions have anything to say about that? Or?
At the end of the day, every business is a cloud-based solution. And every business that doesn't run on the cloud will or already is moving that way. That's the way we connect at this point. That's the way all industries connect within themselves and into other ones. So that's just where the world is going.
Yeah, there are 500,000 different developers using our Cognitive Services API. Now, is it plug and play where you can't do anything else on top of that? Probably not, but it's a hell of a head start. if you look at some of our natural language processing and our speech error rates, I mean, they are as good as though you're having a conversation with a human being. And if there are companies that don't have the time or the resources to develop that on their own, which most don't, why wouldn't you plug that in and then build on top of that? For sure, we make that available for anybody who wants it.
By the way, there's this topic that has come up here and it's come up in other places around the expense of AI. And I'll just go back to that same analogy I just shared about, the car and horses. Federal Express could not run their business on horseback. That wouldn't be an efficient way to do things. And so at some point, and obviously this is not exactly the most linear analogy in the world, but at some point, companies that were at the outset of the automobile had to decide, am I going to move over to this technology, or am I going to keep training people to ride horses and then take the 4 days it takes to get from New York City to Philadelphia? There are expenses in all of these things, and at some point, the expense of not going is going to be way more than the expense of going. And so that's what all businesses have to make decisions about for themselves at this point. When is the right time to step in? Which part of the ecosystem do I want to play in? And when am I ready to start pulling all my chips to the center of the table?
Yeah, it's a key point, and the reason why you're all in the room is that we're sort of moving beyond, and our companies are trying to help this, moving beyond just AI as a buzzword or machine learning as a buzzword. And I think what all these guys are talking about is interesting because for every organization, there's probably a different approach. And I think one of the things that's important for everyone here and for all of us is to educate our teams on what are the right questions to ask. It's not just about checking the box and saying, I've got AI, oh, I do that. It's more about like, is this really the right solution for your business? And what is our strategy? Because lots of the other companies that you compete against are trying to figure out their strategies too.
One of the things that strikes me about either stories of AI that's kind of gone sideways a bit is that it's the thing that humans assume that we know that doesn't get incorporated into the code that seems to be where we have problems. So I'll just give one example. There was AI being deployed in an emergency room for triage, and all of the triage nurses know that if someone with asthma has pneumonia or contracts pneumonia, immediately take them to intensive care. But that's not documented anywhere. It's something that's innate in their training, so that as you're filling in, what other diseases do you have, these kinds of things. Asthma and pneumonia there was no connection between those two that led to really escalate the issue. It was just a normal treatment. So it's these areas where we have kind of either just something that's patently obvious to us, or is just well ingrained in a system that sometimes kind of creates the issue. But it strikes me there's also a real interesting opportunity there. So we think that all gamers are 22-year-old men, when in fact I know a lot of people I went to college with, and I assure you I'm not 22, who spend a lot of money on gaming. How do you set up, for that kind of serendipity, or how do you deal with the fact that all of this assumed knowledge may be wrong?
I can give an example of both. As I mentioned, our model is that we design models that teach machines to go do things, and the machines learn and get smarter as they go. So we've had examples where advertisers have said to us, hey, our KPI is to drive visits to our store, and the model will try to do that, but then go off in the wrong direction and focus maybe on people who are engaging with ads in a different way. And so we've set it up so that our data scientists get alerted to that, any abnormal activity from the model. Kind of like your kids are doing the wrong thing and you see it on the monitor or something. So then they go in and correct the models and put them back on track. An example, though, a really cool example too, where the models found something that we didn't think of was different product categories have different sets of influence. So we were running a toothpaste campaign, for example, where the model started to recognize that people who lived in the same house influenced the purchase. And so they started to target those families, whereas we could run coffee shop ads, and people at work actually influence your coffee buying decisions. So the models figured that out on its own and helped identify those groups of people. So there's kind of the both like dangerous scenarios, not as dangerous as the operating room,
Thankfully, yeah.
but also the upside scenarios where the models are figuring
I
out
think that's somewhat akin to, if you put a first-year medical student into that room and they're performing triage, they might not necessarily be
Yeah.
aware of that either. So it's really a good analogy in that it's just a function of training and awareness. And I think that gets to the heart of what's really challenging today with AI, because a lot of the algorithms for neural nets, for example, are quite good. And what you really start to battle with when you're getting into the nitty-gritty of it is the quality of labeled data and what kind of biases are sort of sneaking into it. So for example, one of the things that we do is a lot of brand safety recognition, so swastikas or nudity or assault rifles or all types of weapons. And with like our assault rifle recognition, eventually we noticed that it's quite good. But it also was creating a very strong association between camouflage, not surprisingly, and assault rifles, and it started to so we had to, sort of push the training gently to a different direction, and that's just this thing maturing. And it really is instructive to think of a lot of these algorithms and neural networks like a child that you are sort of showing over time sort of what's accurate and what's not, and giving them more insight. And as they develop into sort of these more mature entities, and they're able to do things with higher common. So I actually think that if an AI was in the room for that and it was able to learn in the way that it's intended to, like that would never happen again ever in a million years. Whereas it could happen again with a human. So
The next class. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Got it. Okay, so we have a room full of advertising/marketing professionals. Whether the estimates around lost jobs to AI, et cetera, are right or wrong, how would you recommend they all future-proof their careers for a marketing world that is absolutely more focused on machine learning, artificial intelligence, those kinds of things? Rob?
Yeah, I try to think of it less about job creation or elimination and more about skill evolution, right? If you think about what our team does every single day, in search for 20 years, we were run based on Excel, and there are new tools and systems that we've built with our own teams, whether it's our own products like Power BI or even some proprietary tools that we built ourselves, that we're trying to tell people it used to be a huge skill to know how to do a pivot table or a VLOOKUP. You know what? There are things that can do that for you much faster, much easier, and knowing the formula is not nearly as important as it used to be. So how do you evolve your skill set versus put yourself out of a role? In any type of advertising relationship, at least my personal belief is that there will always be a need for technology and human beings to work hand in hand versus a full handoff on either direction. So I've asked my team, and we talk about all the time, is how do we evolve our skill sets to make sure that we're ready for whatever the next evolution will be.
Did you just promote Microsoft Excel talking about pivot tables?
Listen, I'm a company man. I don't know what to tell you.
Product placement.
Yeah. So I agree with that. I think the biggest part of this is just being in it. And there feels like there's a lot of analogies here to the beginning of social and the beginning of mobile. If you think about the beginning of the social, there were so many clients when I was on the agency side, and I had really great clients too, by the way. And even colleagues of mine at the agency would say comments like, "I need a social," or something. like it was one of those things. And maybe some people in this room were actually those people. Like we all feel that way at some point. But there were brands and there were agencies and there were professionals who got in there early on and said, you know something? A 6-second looping Vine that shows how you can do this DIY project at home is a really good idea. Let's go do that. And that wasn't a social. That was a really great way of utilizing social and utilizing video in that case. And I think the same thing is true here. AI is such a broad category. You've got to find the projects where you want to increase your performance as an organization, identify what those are, and try it. Just get in. I know that sounds totally, broad, but that's really the same way that social started, or content started, or mobile started, or even digital.
So I've been in this role for 9 months, and last summer I was looking around the industry to figure out what I thought the next wave of social or mobile would be. And I became fascinated by artificial intelligence and realized that this was something that was going to change our worlds, not only our industries. So just from a career and personal development standpoint, I went out and read as much as I could about it. I actually started advising a few companies in the space who needed my business and sales knowledge, and they gave me a lot of AI knowledge. And so that was a really easy way for me to get involved deep in the industry. So I would just suggest for all of our careers, be the champion within your organization that learns about it and knows the most about it, because your organizations and your bosses are going to start asking you about it. It's going to be a good position for you to understand the space and be able to help move your business forward.
Yeah, I would just say briefly that I really agree with what you said around sort of evolving your skill set. I think that ultimately the only constant is change, and really rapid change is something we talk about in my company a lot. And change represents a lot of danger, and it also represents all new opportunity. So being in the mindset of approaching a changing environment or advances in AI really as an opportunity, I think helps put you in the mindset of trying to take advantage of those opportunities. I think there's no easy way to future-proof your career. I think that this stuff is still nascent enough that I don't think anybody's in imminent danger. But I think this stuff will change more radically and more rapidly than anybody is going to anticipate. And I think that's just a truth of the world that we need to sort of accept and again, treat as an opportunity.
Is there an area that you're especially interested in that feels, I'm just asking you to look out maybe past the next couple of years. Is there an area that you're either particularly excited about or concerned about that you're watching closely, and what should we be watching? Maybe that's the other way of asking that question.
I think from a technology perspective, I think unsupervised learning is really like the next sort of holy grail that we want to sort of get our hands around, because in order to train these neural networks today, you need to be able to acquire really high quality, typically manually labeled training sets, and that is highly limiting. So it means that if you want to do something new or identify something new, whether it's text or video or imagery or strategies or all types of other things, you need to effectively be able to acquire this data, and that's typically is very expensive and time-consuming. When you're able to just kind of release an intelligence onto the internet or into the world, and there have been some companies that have done this, and we know that it's possible, but they're just sort of the algorithms aren't quite there yet. Then I think we're going to see a massive increase in capabilities very quickly.
I'm super excited about AI creative, and you guys work in that space and we work in that space. But this has been the age-old story, but trying to engage with audiences in a more relevant way, in a more authentic way. And the more we get down that line, it's not about advertising to people, it's about engaging with them and having dialogue. And so it feels like it's a really exciting time right now to be applying that to that challenge.
To add to that too, I think the AI content is really interesting as well. How machines can develop content. It's ads are two-way, and then to be able to synthesize an idea into content that we can all consume is really interesting. And there will be a way. It just really hasn't been invented yet.
Anything on your screen?
I would add. I actually the sub-segment that I'm paying a lot of attention to is AI for good, right? Advances in the medical field, education, solving some of the world's most complex problems, especially watching companies work together to solve those. Just the altruistic side of me, former special education teacher, to me that is really interesting. I'd love to see some companies solve some of these problems, but also, make some money while they do it. It's not such a bad thing either. There seems to be this kind of, you either make a lot of money through X, Y, and Z, or you don't make any, but you do good. And I'd love to see those two, come together using a lot of the technology that a lot of these companies built.
I read another interesting stat too, just to take off Rob's altruistic view on the world, which I appreciate.
It's true.
There's this idea of losing jobs from AI, but finding a job is actually a really incredibly hard thing to do, and it's mostly very random. If you think about how you find your jobs, you network with people or you get called by a recruiter. But developing AI that can actually match skill sets and people's backgrounds with the available jobs in the world is something that can actually solve some of the problems around unemployment today, and maybe get us all into careers that we find more fulfilling and jobs that we think we can do better.
You don't find your career fulfilling?
I love what I do.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to leave it there with a couple of things. There is a kill switch when things go slightly sideways. I heard that on stage. That makes me feel better. There are as many applications to AI as you can think about categories of business or life itself. Your careers are secure for at least a little while, and then it's on you to figure out how you take your career where this goes. I want to thank everyone on the panel here. Thank you all for coming, and I hope this was helpful.